Welcome to the Phillip Wylie Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Phillip Wylie.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Phillip Wylie Show. Today I'm very excited to have Andy Robbins joining. I've been a big fan of SpecterOps and Bloodhound for many years, had some of his former colleagues on my previous podcast, The Hacker Factory, and I've been intending to have Andy on for a while because some of the people at SpecterOps said he'd be a great guest, which I agree with. So finally got him scheduled. It was all pretty much me trying to get things scheduled because I get ADHD when it comes to trying to find guests. I see someone, they'd be perfect or they'd be good, and then forget to schedule them. So finally I got around to scheduling you. So thanks for joining.
It's my pleasure to be here, Phillip. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's really good to have you on. It's really cool to see how Bloodhound's evolved. And I guess there's like a new version of it. And I've heard there's even some improvements to the community edition as well. So we'll kind of get into that. But if you wouldn't mind sharing your background, kind of your hacker origin story.
Yeah. So let me kind of give you the broad strokes and then we can go into any details if anything sounds more interesting. So my name is Andy Robbins. I'm the principal product architect at SpecterOps. And so my background, the broad strokes, back in the 90s, I was into the AOL hacking scene. And so learned a lot of skills there. I tried to do a different career once I became an adult. And it wasn't until I got into my late 20s that I actually got my first formal IT job, which was small managed service provider doing kind of IT break fix, sysadmin, help desk stuff in the Tri-Cities in Washington State. In 2012, I found my first full-time pen testing job off of Craigslist. And I stayed there until 2015. In 2015, I joined Verus Group, where I transitioned more into a red team role. A year later, in 2016, we released Bloodhound. And then in 2017, I was part of, and still am part of, the original 13 founding members of SpecterOps. And so I've been at SpecterOps since then. I don't do as much red team stuff anymore because now my full-time focus is on product research and development in support of Bloodhound.
Very cool. It's kind of nice to have those, I'm sure a lot of firms would like to have the ability to have like a staff that's basically just dealing with tooling, and it's kind of cool to see all the different things that have come out of SpecterOps and really cool to see how Bloodhound is done.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I being on the inside and seeing, the transition from somebody doing a service, like a red team engagement, identifying a problem and then coming up with the tooling to solve that problem, or coming up with some new tradecraft or some new way of looking at a problem in the first place. It's always really exciting to be part of that on the inside before it becomes public. But like you say, our company is all about transparency, making things as easy to understand as possible. And a lot of that means putting this tooling and putting our blog post out there for people to consume for free.
That's awesome. And that's one of the things too. I've worked, my past couple jobs I've kind of worked closely with the marketing team, in some cases on the marketing team, and SpecterOps has always been an example I shared with marketing, because sometimes, this is kind of getting off on a tangent, not so much directly practitioner level, but more something that management or marketing teams could take a lesson from. This is a lot of cases people are too focused on the CISO, the top of funnel. They're focused on these are the people that are signing off on the products. They're the one that owns the budget and all this, but they don't stop to think. Sometimes it's the practitioners that see these products, that take it back and request, getting this product and sharing with the team. And that's where they kind of miss out. And one of the things I've liked about what SpecterOps does and some other of organizations similarly, that they share these blog posts, they share these tools freely and not charge for them. Although there's, you know, a commercial version of Bloodhound now, but it's nice that there's still the free version. But to write these blog posts where people can learn from and all this, it's very valuable, because one of the things from a company perspective, it's good brand awareness. People are going to know about your company. Your competitors that's not doing this, people may not know of them as well unless they're doing a lot of speaking at conferences. So for anyone listening, this is a great way to really market your products. You're creating content with your practitioners and not just boring stuff to sell your services. Sometimes when you actually showing the need for it, then you can sell products that way.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think what you said, what that makes me think of is, you know, we have been very intentional about how we approach marketing, and a lot of us have like really complicated feelings about that word in the first place because we all come from practitioner background. But what you said makes me think of a quote that came from a leader at Red Hat a few years ago, and that leader kind of put it like this. He said, if we give people an excellent experience for free, then enough of those people will choose to become paying customers that we have a viable business. And that's pretty much been our strategy.
That's a good strategy, because, you know, some people too will do it just to support the company, not so much from a perspective that they need it. They're willing to help support, which is great to see.
Yeah.
So whenever you came out with Bloodhound, was there anything, I would assume, not that I can recollect, was there anything else out there that did AD security like you do?
So there were a couple of things out there that were very similar to what Bloodhound was trying to do before Bloodhound came out. One of them was a white paper that was published by Microsoft Research, and the primary author on that paper is a person named Alice Jung. And so Alice and her team, they put this white paper out called Heat Ray back in 2008, if I recall correctly. Their white paper goes into using graph theory to find attack paths, find choke points, you know, do like very, very similar things to what Bloodhound was doing. Their research was super great, and I learned a lot from reading their white paper. It may have been a little too early, because in 2008, I mean, that's the year of Conficker. That's MSO 8067. So it's still the era of server-side exploits. And so the need for finding these identity-based attack paths wasn't felt very acutely at that time. So they were way ahead of their time. And then from a French government agency, two people put out a piece of software called AD Control Paths. And that focused on, again, putting control paths of relationships between principals and secureable objects in Active Directory into a graph, and then finding attack paths, finding choke points that way. That was authored by Emmanuel Gras and Luca Boyo, and I probably got that name wrong. So those are the two things that I'm aware of that were very, very similar to what we were trying to accomplish with Bloodhound. I think we hit it at the right time, and I think we did a lot of work to make the tool as usable as possible and reduce any friction that we could find with data collection, data analysis, ingest, all of that. We tried to make the tool as user-friendly as possible, and I think that was a big part of I think that's a big part of why it took off the way it did.
Yeah, and I really think the graphing you do is pretty awesome to be able to visualize that, because that, in my opinion, is something so much easier to show management types that don't understand the technology, because you actually see some companies, just like a company called SCI has a Hiver product that they ingest all of their pen test content and red teaming exercises and all this into this platform that shows like an attack graph, so you can show whether inside threat, external threat. So you see more tools doing that, and you guys were kind of doing that before a lot of these others caught on.
Yeah, I think the industry in general, I think, is relatively young. Like if you compare our industry to the industry of architecture or food service or food safety, we're very, very young in that regard. So the industry as a whole is very young, but then this capability of visualizing data problems and data security problems in this way, I think, is also relatively brand new. We put Bloodhound out in 2016, but in our industry, what is that? That's 7 years ago. So that's an eternity in our industry. But at the same time, it's really not that much time at all. And I think the future is very bright with what we can continue to do with visualization and data modeling in a more formal way.
Very cool. And so as far as like the language is programmed, and what is Bloodhound written in?
Well, it might be helpful if I kind of give maybe the origin story of Bloodhound.
Sure, that'd be great. Yeah, please do.
So back in 2015, I was working with Rohan Berserker, Will Schroeder, Justin Warner, Dave McGuire, Jason Frank, etc., at a company called Varus Group in a division called the Adaptive Threat Division. So pen test team at Varus Group. We had this one customer that we all kind of saw as the crucible. And so if you were sent there to do a red team assessment, you were going up against an extraordinarily complex environment that had world-class defenders defending it. And so we had to fight tooth and nail to have any kind of success whatsoever in that environment. At that time in 2015, we and many other pen test shops all kind of discovered this very reliable but very tedious methodology where we could take a shell and find out from the user context that we're in, what are other systems in the environment this user has local admin on? And of those systems, who's logged on to those systems? Choose one of those, pivot, repeat. And so by doing that over and over and over again, inch by inch, we could eventually maybe find our way to domain admin. We referred to that methodology as derivative local administrator. Other people call it identity snowball attack or the credential shuffle attack. So we had this methodology, and we had PowerView from Will Schroeder at the time, written in PowerShell, which could collect all the info that we needed to find those attack paths manually. We couldn't put those two things together in a way that let the computer do the work of finding those paths as opposed to us trying to find those. And we tried crazy things. We tried using like Excel pivot tables. We had diagrams on walls, like the "It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia" meme. It was wild. So I go to that customer, that's like the kind of crucible, super hard target. Try to use that methodology, and there's a little bit of success, but we're just too slow, and the environment is too complex. And so the defenders catch us, they shut us down, and we have to fight to get access back and fight to find some way to escalate our privileges. So that engagement is over. We deliver our report. We kind of go back and we're licking our wounds, because to be honest with you, these defenders, they kicked our teeth in. They really showed us that they own the network, not us. And a lot of times for pen testers, the experience is the exact opposite. I go and have lunch one day with my very good friend, Sam Briesmeister, and I explain the problem to him. And he introduces me to this graph theory branch of computer science and mathematics. And he kind of teaches me the basics, and he kind of says, like, here's how I would approach this problem with graph theory. Over the next couple of months, I learn as much as I can about graph theory. I experiment with data models, trying to find one that works and finding one that will let me find these paths without having to have some super complicated query or a query that's going to take weeks to finish. At the end of that, I had a POC called PowerPath written in PowerShell. And I had a blog post associated with that called Automated Derivative Administrator Search. Rohan Vazirker and Will Schroeder helped take that into something a little more polished, maybe a lot more polished than what I could do on my own. And we just kind of referred to that as literally test.html, just kind of a way to visualize what was happening in memory in PowerShell. Once we had that POC to the point where we could visualize the nodes, we go back to that Crucible customer. And this customer, they had something like 400,000 endpoints in this massive Active Directory forest with over 100 domains with trust mappings that were really hard to wrap your head around. Our objective was always start off with, domain user access in some random domain and become enterprise admin at the forest root. Until then, we could never even get to domain admin in any domain, let alone get to enterprise admin. Once we went in with test.html, which eventually became Bloodhound, we identified, analyzed, and executed an attack path that went through 7 different domain trust boundaries, not achieving domain admin in any of them and not needing to. And then that attack path landed at enterprise admin. And we got all the way to being one step away from enterprise admin before the defenders caught us. So we were that close. It was the greatest success that we had ever had at that customer. The customer was super happy with our findings. And we came back from that, and we knew that with test.html, we had something that was worth investing our time into and making it more polished and making it a real thing. That eventually became Bloodhound. And so we were spending our evenings, our weekends, our early mornings, any free second we had, we were spending developing this tool. Earlier, you asked about what language Bloodhound was written in. And so at the time that Bloodhound was released, it was written in PowerShell for the data collector. So Sharphound didn't exist yet. It was just PowerShell. The interface was JavaScript, Electron, and the interface graph rendering was done with this thing called Lincurious, which is a JavaScript library on top of Sigma for rendering graphs. And then the database was Neo4j, which is all Java. And that was it. So it's a very simple architecture, a very limiting architecture. But it was powerful enough that when we released it at DEF CON in 2016, we continued to use it. Our colleagues in the industry adopted it and have been using it ever since. So yeah, that's a very long-winded way of answering your question of what it's written in, and that's legacy Bloodhound. That's not what the new hotness is all written in.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because that's definitely useful information. So kind of describe kind of the current state of Bloodhound, kind of what it's like now?
Yeah. So since then, a lot has changed. So we are probably your listeners are probably hearing this in December, and so back at Black Hat of this year, we released Bloodhound CE, or Bloodhound Community Edition. There's a lot that has gone into that release, and the fundamentals of the program are mostly written with Golang now. So the API is Golang, the web server is Golang, the Azure data collection capability called Azure Hound is written in Go. Sharp-Hound is still in C#. And then we also have ancillary tooling like Bark, which is written in PowerShell. Maybe it might be useful if I talk about kind of how we got from, the release of 2016 to the release most recently of Black Hat in 2023.
Sure, that would be great.
Okay. So when we released Bloodhound back in 2016, there were actually only 3 components of the data model. It was who's logged on where, which then you can use for token theft or token impersonation attacks. Who belongs to what security groups in Active Directory, and who has admin rights on which systems. And that was it. It was just those 3 things. Since then, we have added attack primitives that take into consideration abusable control of securable objects in Active Directory. For example, generic all, generic right. Control of group policy and how group policy affects users and computers through GP links and OU hierarchy. Several different Kerberos attacks, Kerberosting, and several different flavors of Kerberos delegation attacks. And so along the way, we've been very careful about what attack primitives we have added to Bloodhound. We use the product ourselves. So the SpecterOps red team uses Bloodhound. Our adversary detection people use Bloodhound. Obviously, in the product team, we use it. And so because we are users, we care about how accurate the software is. We don't want to have to, coach it along the way to getting to some kind of actionable insight that it is telling us about. We want the software to do the work for us. That care has also meant that we have a pretty high bar for what has gone into the product. And usually what that means is that if an attack primitive is going to go into Bloodhound, it needs to be practical. And what that mostly means is that there needs to be existing tooling to actually execute that attack. Or if that tooling doesn't exist, then we're going to sign up ourselves to develop and maintain that tooling. And so a lot of the Kerberos attacks that you see are abusable with Rubius by Will Schroeder and Lee Christensen, for example. Oh, my camera just turned off.
That's okay. Not a problem.
We also focus on what we call abuse primitives, which we see as being distinct from vulnerabilities. So we're not taking into account missing patches or DLLs that are out of date, binaries that are out of date. We focus on attack paths or risk that emerges out of a combination of the mechanics of a system, the configurations of that system, and the behaviors of users or principals or identities in that system. So how the combination of those three things, how risk emerges out of that combination. We do that because the shelf life for those abuse primitives compared to a missing patch, that shelf life is very, very long, because Microsoft isn't going to patch how group delegation works. They're not going to patch most of the time how Kerberos delegation works. And so we want to put attack primitives into our product that the only fix for those are configuration changes or user behavior changes. We'll let other people worry about vulnerability management. That's a pretty mature space, and we don't see much of a need for us to directly play in that area. So we're going to focus on this emergent risk idea. So having said all that, and getting closer to, you know, the release of Bloodhound CE and some of the problems that Bloodhound CE has solved, taking the care to understand those attack primitives, to prove them at ourselves, to develop tooling, maintain tooling, or contribute to existing tooling, it has meant that the adoption of other abuse primitives has been relatively slow historically. Great example is Active Directory certificate services, which we are working on adding into the product now. But the research for that came out now a couple of years ago. And the cause of a lot of that slowdown for us to be able to put things in the product, you know, not as quickly as we would like to, is that the reality is that for the past several years, since 2016, the only two people who really can add features into the product and maintain those features long term have been Rohan Vazirker and me. And we've got other things that we have to do as part of our jobs. So that could serve as a good segue into talking about Bloodhound CE. That kind of lays some good foundation for talking about that. But I guess any questions about what I said so far as the history of Bloodhound up until then?
Sure. No, it's really interesting. And so, yeah, to go into CE would be good.
Yeah. So I think, as you know, and as I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, we put out a commercial version of our software back in July of 2021 is when we launched Bloodhound Enterprise. When we released Bloodhound back in 2016, we and pretty much everybody else kind of saw, like, yeah, this has value for pen testers and red teamers, but the real value is for defenders in actually doing something about these attack paths. So we've always wanted to launch a commercial version of the software that's aimed at defense. We did that back in July of 2021. At that time, we also stated our intent to merge the code bases. And so Legacy Bloodhound has been dependent on Linkurious for so long, but Linkurious has actually been abandonware for several years, and it has not received any updates in a long time. Bloodhound Enterprise, for a long time, we've been using commercial graph rendering software. To get to the point of converging the code bases, we actually did that with Sharphound about a year ago now, a little more than a year ago. So the data collection has been merged for quite some time. But with the release of Bloodhound CE, Bloodhound CE and Bloodhound Enterprise now fully share a code base. And actually, Bloodhound CE is kind of a dependency of Bloodhound Enterprise now, and is used as kind of a module or a dependency for everything else that Bloodhound Enterprise puts on top of that foundation. I think when people have been coming from Bloodhound Legacy and they start to use Bloodhound CE, there will be a lot of really obvious things that they will see that are improvements. So Bloodhound CE over Bloodhound Legacy has faster data ingest, faster data collection, faster query times, and a friendlier UX. All of that work to accomplish all of that has taken, compared to myself and Rohan, just kind of an army of two, has taken like an actual army of engineers, of proper software engineers, to build all of that and maintain all of that. There's a quote that comes to mind, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so building this team of software engineers, product manager, VP product, etc., who have joined us in this mission of attack path management and analysis, they have helped us get to the point now where we're able to implement features in the product way faster than we ever could, because it's not just me and Rohan anymore. It's a team of, depending on when this episode comes out, like 20 to 30 people who are now developing this product. There are other features that Bloodhound CE introduces that are maybe not as obvious, but are just as impactful of the other things I said. The thing that I personally am most excited about is the REST API that Bloodhound now has. Also, the data ingest and post-processing is now asynchronous, so you continue to use the application while data is being imported in the background. And we also brought some features that might be considered like enterprise only or enterprise grade features. We brought into our free product as well. So we have proper user management and role-based access control. So if I have Bloodhound and I want to give you access to it, I can make you a user for my Bloodhound instance. That also includes the option to enforce MFA for users who are authenticating to your Bloodhound instance, and also SAML integration with some other existing IDP that speaks SAML. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah,
that's really nice to add in the added layer of security, because having that kind of information, pen testers using it, anyone can get a hold of it. A threat actor is someone you don't want to have that data could be using.
Oh,
it.
yeah.
So that was an awesome idea.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that user management feature that we put into our free software. We have discussions all the time, and we have disagreements, and kind of where we landed on with this is that SAML is not the differentiator between our free software and our enterprise software. So why put that behind a paywall if that's not where the value comes from with the enterprise product? So we'll continue to do that wherever we can as well, is as we introduce features into Bloodhound Enterprise, as much as we can, we will make those features available in Bloodhound CE as well.
So just out of curiosity, what does Bloodhound Enterprise give you that CE doesn't?
Yeah, so Bloodhound CE or Bloodhound Legacy, they are created by pen testers for pen testers. And so it's all about get the data in there. You've got a week or 2 weeks that you're on an assessment. You need to find a path to DA. You need to find a path to your objective. Make that happen as quickly as possible with the least amount of friction as possible. Any barriers to that have to go. We have to solve those barriers. And it's all with the intent of helping pen testers, helping red teamers find those paths, find those escalation paths to domain admin, enterprise admin, or some kind of data objective. And so that is what the product does. And that is what the product does very well. That's what Bloodhound CE does very well. That's what its focus is. Bloodhound Enterprise is trying to solve a similar problem, but actually a much more difficult problem. So my background, I think, is pretty similar to yours, and probably similar to a lot of your listeners, is pen test red team. And so I have seen this. You've probably seen this. A lot of people have seen this, where you do a pen test, you find an attack path, you report it to the customer. They look at the different components of it. Like, okay, they pivoted over here. They got this person's credential. They did this thing over here. Okay, great. That attack path for a lot of organizations is the first time they've ever seen how these connections create impact. From domain user to domain admin, those individual pieces, they get a lot of attention, and for good reason. We don't want to be in a situation where someone can get initial access and then elevate to domain admin no matter where they land. The problem is, on the pen test side, on the red team side, your job isn't to find every single attack path that there is. Your job is to find 1, 2, 5, a dozen, maybe, and then report that to the customer in a way that kind of helps them make progress to strengthen their security posture. Bloodhound, when it shows an attack path, it is only showing a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percentage of the data that it actually has. The databases that Bloodhound has, they have millions of nodes, millions or even billions of connections between those different nodes. And so the problem that we want to solve on the defensive side is we don't want attack paths to really be a problem anymore at all. And we hone in on tier 0 or control plane or whatever you want to say. We find that set of the most critical identity management assets, the domain controllers, domain admins, etc. And then we find the connections into that set. What are the choke points that an attacker is going to have to go through to get there? And then we measure what is the impact of each of those individual choke points. And then what is the remediation for any of those things? Or to put it a different way, what we try to equip our customers with is, there's a problem. Here's how bad it is. Here's what you should do about it. As plain speaking as I can make it. And that is actually not easy to do in the real world. The graphs are extraordinarily complex, and we actually have 2 granted patents for what we've come up with to solve that problem. And it's been very effective so far. It's been very, very effective for our customers, even to the point where some of our customers, they are also red team customers of ours. And so our red team will go into one of our Bloodhound Enterprise customer environments, run Bloodhound, try to find an attack path to get somewhere, and they're just not there. The attack paths just simply are not there. And that is great for us. It's great for our customers. It's great for our people on the red team side, because they can go and start to research other things, other platforms, and find other avenues of abuse or exploitation to continue to give value to our customers. And some of those find their way into the product so that we can then solve that problem long term for all of our customers.
Oh, very interesting. So we're getting down towards the end of the episode. Is there anything you'd like to share before we close it out?
Yeah. So a couple of things came to mind when getting ready for this interview. that I really wanted to express to people who might be new to the industry, or people who might be, looking for a way to, go from maybe a junior position to a more senior position. And so there are a few thoughts. One way that you can get really positive attention and really prove your value is with 3 steps, which are easily said, but very difficult to actually do. But this is the way that I think about it. 1, find the biggest unsolved problem that you can find. And it has to be a problem that matters, and it has to be a problem that matters to a lot of people. Step 2, understand that problem as deeply as you possibly can. Build empathy with the people who have this problem, understand their perspectives, understand how the problem impacts a business or an organization of any kind. And then step 3 is start to solve that problem by creating instrumentation that can be used to measure how bad that problem actually is in a given environment. Once you have that instrumentation, you can actually start to measure whether that problem is being fixed or not. And then I'm a simple guy. I use a lot of axioms or just simple phrases to kind of guide my life. And there are 3 that I want to share. 1, take the work seriously, not yourself. 2, stay focused on outcomes, not output. And number 3, be loyal to people, not to companies.
Great advice. I like that.
Thank you. It's served me well so far.
Yeah, that's some good solid advice. That's good, because too many cases, like the people being loyal to the company, and there's cases where the company is kind of toxic, but there's certain people in the company that are good. So it's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah. And I guess one thing I would add to that is loyalty can be expressed in many different ways. Loyalty does not mean that you work at the same company forever. Loyalty could mean building relationships. Maybe that means leaving a company amicably. That's okay. But doing so in a way that doesn't hurt the people who you want to maintain that loyalty with.
Great advice. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join today, and it was very cool to learn more about the history of Bloodhound and kind of the evolution. So very excited to hear about the new features and how it's evolved into the product it is today.
Yeah, thanks, Phillip. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Phillip Wylie Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Phillip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Phillip Wylie. Until next time.